Good evening, everyone. It is good to all be together for this gathering that focuses on spirituality and health. Tonight's session, this is a part of a series of meditations and interactive reflections, again, on spirituality and health. And tonight, the focus will be spirituality and mental health. And our presenter for the evening is Dr. Emmanuel Lartey, who is the professor of spirituality and pastoral theology. He is also the pastor of Wesley Methodist Church in Wesley Methodist Church Atlanta in Loganville, Georgia. Dr. Lartey is also a trained clinical psychologist. So we are delighted that he is taking some time out to be with us and talk to us about what it means to be spiritual beings and mental health. So for our presentation tonight, it is being recorded. And so I ask that for the time being that you keep yourselves muted, video and audio. And after the presentation, we will have some time for Q&A. And as I invite you all that through the presentation, if you have questions, post your question in the chat session. Post your questions in the chat session. And so let's get started. But before we begin, I would like to invite everyone for a time of centering breath. So wherever you are, if you can bring yourself into a posture, a relaxed but straight posture. And feel yourself grounded in your being. If you are seated, your feet planted on the floor, on solid ground. And square your shoulders, but relax them. And now I invite you to take a deep breath in. Exhale. Take another deep breath in. Exhale completely. Inhale deeply, inflating fully your lungs and your diaphragm. Exhale completely. Take another deep cleansing breath in. And exhale. Now hear these words of the great Howard Thurman. How good it is to center down, to sit quietly and see one's self pass by. The streets of our minds seethe with endless traffic. Our spirits resound with clashings, with noisy silences, while something deep within hungers and thirsts for the still moment and the resting lull. With full intensity we seek, ere the quiet passes, a fresh sense of order in our living, a direction, a strong, sure purpose that will structure our confusion and bring meaning in our chaos. Dr. Lartey.
Thank you so very much. And thank you to everyone who is on this platform tonight. Thank you, LaRonda, for all the work that has gone into preparing not only this particular reflection time, but also all the others and the meditation sessions. I'm delighted to be able to participate and to be able to share on what I recognize is really crucial in these times as we think together about spirituality and mental health in particular tonight. So our topic, yes, our topic is spirituality and mental health, but I want to begin by emphasizing the centrality of spirituality. I want to say that in certainly my way of looking at humanity, and I think the way that a lot of us will think about human beings is that the center of our beings, or the core of our beings, is really spirit. Spirit, it seems to me, lies at the heart. People sometimes say it's the inner being, it's the heart that lies at the center of our beings. That sort of lends itself towards thinking of the soul as being the core or the center. But influenced particularly by African ways of thinking about humanity, I would place our spirits, so I would place our spirituality as being core, as being central. And that really influences the way in which we live and the way in which we have our social relations, the way in which we organize our lives, is centered around and is influenced by, inspired by spirit. And so when we talk about spirituality, we are talking, in my view, we are talking about that which is central to our being as human beings. And this is something that all people have as the center of our beings, I suggest. It's not only Christians. Every human being is centered in spirit. And so the way in which I think about spirituality is that it refers to a human capacity. It is something that we, all of us, every human being, wherever you meet any human being, that human being has the ability to relate. And it is that which I describe as being spiritual. That capacity, that human capacity for relationship. So the fact that we can relate is that which is spiritual about us. So I'm defining spirituality as referring to the human capacity for relationship with God, with self, with others, with the environment, nature, and then also with that which transcends sensory experience. So it has to do with our sensory experience, but it also transcends it. It is often expressed in our activities, given in given places, at given times, and in different social contexts. And this capacity leads us to act in particular kinds of ways in the world. So recently, our protests and our marches have been, for many of us, an expression of our spirituality. Our speaking, our acting has been an expression of our spirituality. And so I want to say I want to talk a little bit more about this by referring to what I describe as five dimensions of spirituality. So spirituality has to do with our relationship with God, our relationship with transcendence, how we relate to God, how we relate to the creator, the source of all of life. However we understand, however we define, however we conceptualize God, that ability to relate. And a lot of spiritual practices are geared towards strengthening or deepening or enhancing this relationship with God. And so a lot of our activities, our meditative activities, our study activities, our reflective abilities, our reflective activities are directed towards our prayer, our study, our reflection is directed towards strengthening that relationship with God, which is central to our spirituality. But I want to suggest, and I think it's very important to take seriously the fact that our capacity to relate to ourselves also derives from our spirituality. So how we think about ourselves, how we esteem ourselves, whether we esteem ourselves highly or we esteem ourselves lowly, this also is generated from our spiritual selves. Spirituality also has to do with how we relate to other people. Our relationship with, if you like, our dyadic relationship, our relationship with one other person. A person that it may be a parent or a loved one, a child. We have a particular relationship with a particular person. That also has to do with our spirituality. Our spirituality also has to do with how we relate with groups among people. So you can see that particular groups or particular societies or communities share common thoughts about, common practices, common activities that have to do with strengthening their relationships among them, and also relationships with God and with self. And so this also is a dimension of spirituality that is very, very important. We are influenced, we are shaped, we are affected by the groups that we participate in. And these can enhance our spirituality, or they can also lead towards its detriment. The fifth dimension that I draw attention to is our relationship with places and things, if you like. A lot of us find nature and being able to walk in nature, climb a mountain, observe the trees and the streams and the rivers, a lot of us find that to be maybe even the highest point of our spiritual experience. There's something about being in nature. There's something about being related to particular places. Particular places evoke within us deep feelings of meaning and deep feelings of our place in this world. And so these are dimensions that are a part of our understanding of our spirituality. And these all are related to health. In each of these dimensions, there can be health and there can also be disease. So it is possible for there to be, in our relationship with ourselves, for example, when we have really negative views about ourselves, that can really be to our detriment. And so each of these dimensions has to do with that which we call health. So what I put up here is the World Health Organization definition of health, a state of complete physical, mental, social, and social well-being, and spiritual. The most recent iterations of this definition, which was first established in the late 1940s, has been to recognize that spiritual well-being is also a part of our health. So the World Health Organization largely recognizes physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being as being crucial to any understanding of health. Today we are focusing on mental health, and I thought I would look and share with us out of World Health Organization's understanding of mental health. So here you have a state of well-being in which a person realizes, in other words, can achieve or can actualize their own abilities. So a state of well-being in which a person achieves or realizes or actualizes their own abilities and can cope with the normal stresses of life, which recognizes that life is stressful. Life is full of all kinds of stresses. And our ability to cope with the stresses of life is an indication of our mental health. But not only realizing our individual or actualizing our individual abilities and coping with the stresses of life, but also being able to be productive, being able to work productively and fruitfully. And so situations of unemployment and situations in which one is unable to work have a direct impact on our mental health. So work productively and fruitfully, and then also being able to make a contribution towards our community. So it's not only about our individual well-being, it's also about our ability to work and to make a contribution to the community that we are a part of. Important to recognize in our conversation how these dimensions, friends, map onto what we were talking about in terms of spirituality a moment ago. So we can almost see how relationship with self, relationship with another, relationship with others, relationship with spaces and places, we can see how all of these are also implied here in our mental health. these are times in particular in which we are experiencing a whole lot of emotions, a whole lot of feelings. This particular context, as a result of COVID-19, but also as a result of what has been described as COVID-16-19. So we're dealing with a health pandemic globally, but we're also dealing with systemic racism, and that has existed, and its existence is almost like you can think of it in terms of viral, and so this is also a reality. A third pandemic that is recognized and spoken about freely these days is the economic situation that we find ourselves in. So in a sense, we are in times of great crisis and times of great stress globally, and particularly in this country. At the moment, the United States of America is right at the top of the list of, particularly in relation to COVID-19. It's the country with the largest number of cases and the largest number of deaths as a result of this. So it is completely normal for us to be experiencing this range of emotions. And so one of the first things that is important to do when we are thinking of mental health is the ability to accept and to name feelings is absolutely crucial. So being able to name what we are feeling is, if you like, a crucial step. And so anxiety, stress, worry, fearfulness, depression, feeling low, loneliness, feeling overwhelmed, feeling isolated, helpless, frustrated, guilty, angry. These feelings are characteristic of these times. So if you are feeling this way, if you are experiencing any of these feelings, and you may want to focus on particular ones of this. In fact, I'm going to focus on two, just simply to take us a little further here. But if you're experiencing any of these or all of these, then know that that is completely normal. However, any one of these can become excessive and become the locus or the focus of particular mental health challenges. So I want to talk a little bit about anxiety, because anxiety seems to be the thing that is most characteristic of these particular times. 1 in 3, the statistic is, of persons, just focusing on the United States of America, 1 in 3 persons now clearly speak about anxiety states, and a range of anxiety states, but we participate in them to varying degrees. Commonly described as having both mental and physical symptoms. It's important to recognize that some physical symptoms are the direct result of anxiety. And then also there are mental symptoms. We tend to focus on the mental symptoms as that which we label as anxiety, but there are physical symptoms as well. Focusing on, for the purposes of this conversation, focusing on the mental symptoms, anxiety is best described as an unhelpful thinking pattern. An unhelpful thinking pattern, which we experience when our mind fixates on threat, uncertainty, and negativity. So when our minds are focused on that which threatens us, or that the situations of uncertainty and situations of negativity, then anxiety is particularly prevalent and unhelpful. Anxiety can occur on its own as a response to stress, or it can trigger stress. Anxiety can actually trigger a lot of stress. And when it occurs as a response to stress, it can intensify the stress. You know, anxiety can make the stress even worse and can lead even to panic attacks. It's important to understand that anxiety is not something that we can kind of remove, right? It's recognized as an automatic survival mechanism. What is important is to learn how to respond to anxiety helpfully so that we don't get carried away and it doesn't become excessive. So I want to talk about I just want to talk about 4 dimensions of, if you like, of anxiety that seem to be quite present and prevalent in these particular times. The first is threat scanning. And you may find yourself, I sometimes find myself searching the environment for what I fear, consciously or subconsciously. And I find myself sometimes assigning meaning to things that may not be actually harmful. And a couple of examples here. I don't know if any of us do this. I do this. You know, when I cough, yes, yeah. And then I listen and I'm kind of like looking at what is happening in Britain, where I have family, back in Ghana, where I have family. So I find myself doing this, and I need to remind myself and check myself on some of these things. That's one of the things that happens. But then there's also, secondly, catastrophizing, if there's such a word. But it's when your mind jumps to the worst case scenarios, and when you are driven immediately, your mind is driven immediately to the worst possibility. So you feel tightness in your chest, and your mind immediately tells you that you must have coronavirus and your life is in danger. Or you hear of any kind of challenge, and immediately you're thinking of the loss of people. Is my person going to die that I'm close with? That's a way of thinking that may not be actually very helpful, but that's catastrophizing. And then something that some therapists describe as hypothetical worry. First of all, realizing that worry is completely normal. It only becomes unhelpful when we focus excessively on hypothetical worries instead of practical worries. We have enough practical worries to concern ourselves with. Hypothetical worries are especially those what-if thoughts that are typically about things we don't have much control over. Our ability to be comfortable with uncertainty is what is at stake here. If we are uncomfortable with uncertainty, then we are likely to be prone to hypothetical worry and spend a lot of time focusing on the future instead of the present. a couple of examples are there. And then two others very quickly. Emotional reasoning, when your mind tells you that your emotions reflect reality. When you're feeling scared, then there must be danger. When you feel guilty, then you must have done something wrong. Well, sometimes you feel guilty in the absence of having done something wrong. And then what is described as fortune telling, when your mind interprets predictions as facts. When you begin to think that what is being predicted is necessarily going to be what I'm going to experience myself all the time. So these are some of the characteristics of anxiety that are around us, particularly at this time. I want to also anxiety is one. Depression is another of the experiences that we have, particularly at this time. What I have here is a quotation from Monica Coleman, a brilliant womanist theologian and systematic theologian who also carries the diagnosis of bipolar disorder, and has written a fascinating and incredibly courageous a memoir called Bipolar Faith. And this quotation comes out of there. It's just a picture or an expression out of her own life, where she says depression is like grief. It's sadness. It's sadness that creeps in on you and slowly overwhelms you. Sometimes I feed it like a repast after a funeral. Other times I sing and shout my way through it. But after the relatives leave and the food is eaten and the lights go off, it's still there. And it feels so bad that you try to escape it by any means necessary. I really recommend this text because it's coming out of the coalface of real experience, and it is courageous. It is realistic. It faces reality, and it also points in the direction of ways forward, which leads me actually into what I want to do for the last few moments of this presentation, to talk about how do we develop resilience, or how do we face and deal with the anxieties and also the depression, together with all the other conditions that that are associated with mental challenges that are around us. And I just offer these four ways, and I have these four-letter words. The first being talk. The first, and talk simply stands for that one of the best ways of developing resilience, developing mental health, is communicating. So sharing and finding those means by which we share with others. It may be a therapist. It may be friends. It may be people that we, and a lot of this happens now using social media, because we are to physically distance ourselves from each other in the interest of our health and our well-being. But physical distance should not mean social distance in terms of inability to communicate. For talking, communicating, expressing our feelings is one of the best ways of enhancing or strengthening our mental health. A second is exercise. So just going out and having plain walk gives the physical energy that is needed. And this is a simple way of actually improving our mental health status. Then, of course, take a rest, chill, break, sleep. This is also a very necessary part of our mental health facilitation. Finally, prayer, and particularly meditative and contemplative prayer, because they particularly affect our mind. Meditation enables us to, in a sense, free our minds and stop us from this rush into the future or rush into the past. That is often the source of much anxiety. And contemplation focuses on one particular word or thought, thus again freeing us from going away into the future with fear or into the past with guilt and anxiety. And so these are some of the ways I suggest that we can, and they're very simple and so very accessible to all of us as we seek to develop our strength and thus enhance our well-being, drawing on our spirituality as persons. Now I'll stop there and respond and interact in ways that we can do.
Thank you, Dr. Lartey, for that presentation. Very helpful and accessible presentation on spirituality and mental health. So far, we have a couple of questions, and I invite everyone to unmute themselves, your mics and or your video if you choose to. And so, Dr. Lartey, the first question I have here is from Lori, and she asks, can you distinguish between anxiety and stress, because they seem interchangeable?
Yeah, that's a very good question. They actually are not interchangeable, but they are very, very closely related. Stress can result from, and there's physical stress and emotional stress and so on. So stress, stress is where the resource, what if it's physical or mental or emotional, is being extended and maybe overextended, right? So physical, for example, when our bodies are overextended, our bodies experience stress, and that has nothing to do with anxiety as such. Anxiety, on the other hand, has very much to do with particularly ways of thinking, ways, and these are ways that focus on threat, focus on uncertainty, and on negativity in ways that exercise our minds in ways that are unhelpful for our being. So anxiety can result from stress, or anxiety can lead to stress. But anxiety is largely to do with our mental state. that unhelpfully focuses on things that are particularly stressful. So there is that kind of distinction that one can make.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question here. There are a few of us on tonight, and others who will be listening to this recording are spiritual care, pastoral care providers, or we work in otherwise stressful jobs in which we provide care to others. In that, how and not just for us, but for those of us in those particular fields, but for anyone, how when our friends come to us with concerns, in that moment we become the caregiver, whoever we are, whatever we do, what is the best response that we can give to those we care for, and also bearing in mind care for ourselves?
Yeah, that's a very, 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 very important and good question. Also, particularly because in the care relationship, a lot of what is going on within us is mediated. So we often say you want to be a non-anxious presence. It's precisely because your anxiety is what is mediated. No matter how calm your words might be, your state, what you're feeling, comes across. And the care relationship is more than the words. It's a lot more is what is mediated from our state, from our state of being. And so a lot of, we really need to take care of ourselves. And we really need to do a lot of the things that can enable us to be less anxious and enable us to be less depressed or less fearful, less worried ourselves, in order to be able to mediate to others that which is calming, that which enables them to deal with their what they are facing. And so in this stress-filled situation that we are in, caregivers particularly need to talk and walk and rest and and pray. We need to do a lot of that, so that we are ourselves in a state where in our relating, and we are able to mediate these things. And so the challenge, I feel particularly the challenge, and so in my church congregation, I spend as often as I can, I call all the nurses and all the what we call frontline workers. I'm constantly saying, how are you doing? What's, because they're in a particularly stress-filled situation, as are chaplains, hospital workers and others. And so because self-care is absolutely crucial in this time. In fact, I would go as far as to say, without that, we're not really going to be very helpful. We may be going through all the motions, but if we are not ourselves taking care of ourselves, we're going to find it really, really that we are mediating harm, not help. And a lot of, I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of caregivers, especially of the pastoral persuasion can actually, in the interest of, while seeking to actually care, they can actually, be mediating a lot of their anxieties and their own concerns far more than helping the people we are with. So it's very important.
Lori says it's tricky. And under these weird, unprecedented circumstances, caring for caregivers seems more unusual than at other times.
Absolutely, and yet it is so crucial. It is so crucial precisely because care is not predominantly in words. It's predominantly in how we are with people, so we may be rushing around, we may be doing a lot, we may be saying a lot, and yet what we are doing, folk don't, they will, if you're the pastor, they will bear with you, but they would much rather that you leave, because you are not making it better by all of your, your vaunted presence. You see, so this is important.
Okay, well, let me ask this. They would prefer the pastor to leave. Is that what you said? And okay, it sounds like you. Is that because the pastor talks too much?
Talks too much, or is an anxious presence?
Okay.
You see, or doesn't fails to empathize, does not recognize where the people are. You see, so is projecting onto them. It could be, people are bereaved, and maybe we may think that, oh yeah, all bereaved people are like this. I'm thinking, of the many eulogies that we've had, we've had to deal with, in the light of the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. These, I mean, there's a lot of, and so a lot of what we do in those times has got to be about facilitating the grieving of others while we are grieving ourselves. You see, so this is why I think it is so important to look for ways in which we will be able to care for ourselves in such a way that we will be able to pay and give them the freedom to grieve, the freedom to be, and to do it in their own way.
Right.
Not in our prescribed ways. Because often we prescribe the way because of our anxiety.
Right.
We would not be able to cope if they were to break down. And so we
try to suppress their feelings.
That this is it. Yeah. So
we might do that to our friends as well.
That's right. That's right.
So Lori adds, creativity seems to be a good thing to add to the list of talk, walk, etc. For example, the way churches have had to stretch during quarantine is actually exciting.
Yeah, the only thing is creativity is not a 4-letter word, so you go find a 4-letter word that. No, yeah, that's true. That's an important thing. I mean, I think you can fold it in though as a feature of some of those things like talking and walking.
Because many times in the process of talking or in the activity of walking, these creative thoughts will come to us. These creative thoughts end up being solutions to problems
Right, right. So looking for those creative things is absolutely, I think, important. Those ways that are maybe even unexpected ways in which we might engage.
Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions out there? We have a few more minutes before we end our session. So does anyone else have any questions or comments or ideas?
I mean, I would ask, how are people, how are people on this call? Maybe each one of us might want to say one way we are finding, to increase or improve our resilience. I use that word because I think that's what we particularly need at this time. So what are the ways we are finding? How are you? What are you finding helpful in terms of your mental health and in terms of your resilience?
Well, I want to thank you both for this evening, and this is a wonderful discussion. I'm trying to think of a 4-letter word for creativity, and idea comes to mind, although it's not a verb. But if we use idea as a verb, in answer to your question, Dr. Lartey, I am finding myself, as the numbers of COVID have suddenly jumped, and it looks as though we're going to be at this a while. Even just in the past 24 to 48 hours, I've had to think of ideas. How will I continue to function now that we've joked that it's the new normal, but I think me and several people I've spoken with actually now feel it is the new normal. And so ideas which link to the 4 other verbs that you gave us, I can pray about those ideas. I can think about them as I walk. I can do those types of things to re-energize myself. Right. But also, creativity came to mind simply because of all that I've watched your star student LaRhonda do during this pandemic. There have been forums that we could attend online. There have been discussions that we could have far away, even from protests and things. Right. So the opportunity to do new things has really been magnificent, even within this very odd bubble of time. Right. But you have to remember and maybe pray about and keep your energy up to get on one more Zoom call. Right. We've all had many, and you might think, I'll just watch television or I'll read a book or something. Right. And where anxiety and pressure and stress come in, I find if I'm feeling a little too anxious, I won't get on that Zoom call. But maybe that's what I'm hearing from you is permission. Okay, Lori, maybe that's when you're resting, and that's okay. Right. So sorry, I talked a long time, but this has unlocked a lot of ideas.
Great.
Awesome. Judith said that she connects with nature, taking time away from news and social media like you, Lori, knowing when to step back and say, okay, enough is enough. Right. Yeah, for a little while.
Any other?
I'm always happy to spread the good news of nonviolent communication. And yeah, ask Lance what he remembers of that. But from that, it fits with what you were saying in terms of naming how we feel, providing some relief. Yeah. I've been told that it gets us from our amygdala to our prefrontal cortex, just naming it.
Right.
And And so doing some self-empathy, you know, I feel this, and of course I feel this. You know, it may not be something that I want to share with the world, but giving myself, you know, sort of that moment.
Yeah.
And with NBC, you know, linking it to what the needs are that are not being met with that. So between that and a practice group where we do that for each other, that's gone a long way in helping me.
Yeah, thank you very much. That I think that's fascinating. We often do not think that when we are doing those things for self, that we are doing something spiritual, and this is what part of what I think is so important. When we relate to ourselves, we are doing spiritual work, and this is I think this is what you're saying. So when we name our fears, when we name, when we do that for ourselves, this is crucial. This is important. Spiritual work as well as mental health work.
One of my NVC trainers puts it as you have to be well resourced.
Yeah.
So you have to fill yourself up in order to handle the other person's difficult feelings.
Right.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Tennille offers that she maintains her weekly telehealth therapy appointments.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And then
Wonderful.
Casey says thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
LaRonda, may I ask one very quick question?
Yes.
It's Dr. Lartey, about your slide, the 5 dimensions of spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And you just said when we're working on ourselves, we are doing spiritual work. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious whether the relationship with God and with self and with others and all of the 5 that you listed, in addition to dimensions of spirituality, do you consider those areas of spiritual work?
Absolutely. yes. Very, very much so. Yeah. So there's spiritual disciplines, mm-hmm. spiritual work can focus on any of these dimensions, mm-hmm. and I would say needs to because they interpenetrate. Mm-hmm. True spiritual work needs to, to pay attention to each of these dimensions.
It's multidimensional. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I took a screenshot of that slide, so thank you very much for providing that.
You're welcome.
Well,
hello.
Hey, Vivian.
Hey, LaRonda. Hello, Dr. Lartey.
Hey, Vivian.
How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good. I think for me, the greatest thing that has been helpful to me during this time has been that I've learned to give myself grace.
Uh-huh.
And to receive and ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to trying to do everything myself, and giving myself grace when things don't work the way I want them to, or the way I thought they should have.
Mm. Wonderful. That's pure spiritual work, if you ask me. Giving yourself grace. Wow. Yeah.
Oh, I'm still a recovering perfectionist, but I'm trying to get there.
I know.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought, grace, and recognizing the grace in every moment, especially during this time. So thank you all for the grace of your presence and joining us in this conversation. There will be two more, and the details of which are in the link that I shared with you in the chat. And there will be 2 more opportunities to meditate together. And these are guided meditations that will happen throughout the summer. So again, we appreciate you all. Dr. Lartey, thank you for this timely discussion that will help many of us as we navigate the times in which we are living. And so before we close, let us all take a few moments to center down again. Take a deep breath in. Exhale. Inhale deeply. Exhale. One last time, inhale. And exhale. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you again to both of you.
Thank you.